Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. We have a really fascinating one for you today.
Yeah, this is going to be really cool.
So today we're going to be diving into a text called Ajki Muli, Spiritual Wisdom. And this one specifically is from March 5th, 2025. And for anyone who is unfamiliar with the Morsley, these are basically daily discourses that offer a unique perspective on Hindu philosophy.
Right. They're like little nuggets of wisdom that you can reflect on throughout the day.
Exactly. And today we have some really intriguing excerpts to unpack. We're going to be looking at things like happiness, karma, even the cycle of life and death, but from a perspective that I think you're going to find very refreshing.
Absolutely. There's a lot to explore here.
Mm.
And one of the first things that really jumped out at me was this phrase, "Kachupatith gajikupkarigade."
Okay, and for those of us who don't speak Hindi, what does that translate to?
Well, it translates to there is no nourishment like happiness.
Yeah.
But it's not just about, feeling good or indulging in pleasure. It actually connects to something much deeper.
Okay, so it's more than just a mood booster.
Right, exactly. The Murli links happiness to spiritual purification. It suggests that remembering a higher power, or what they call BAP, kind of like a fatherly figure while we're engaged in our everyday activities, can actually cleanse us from the inside out.
That's so interesting. So it's almost like happiness becomes this inner fuel, not just an external reward.
Precisely. And that makes me think, what are some of the things in your life that bring you this kind of deep, nourishing happiness, the kind that really sustains you?
Yeah, that's a great question to think about. But, the Murli, it doesn't shy away from the tough stuff either. I mean, it talks about things like vikarma, which I think we can understand as negative karma, right?
Yes, exactly.
And it actually claims that there is a way to overcome it.
It does. And the solution that it offers is something called Srimad,
Srimad, okay.
which basically means divine wisdom. And specifically, it emphasizes remembering the divine and seeing yourself as a soul, not just this physical being, but a soul having this human experience.
So by focusing on that spiritual side, that connection to something bigger, we can actually conquer this negative karma.
That's what the Murli suggests.
But is that something that everyone has the same ability to do, or does it kind of depend on where you're starting from? I mean, do some people maybe have a tougher starting point than others because of their past actions?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it actually gets to the heart of what the Murli calls Vikarmajit, which literally means conqueror of negative karma. It's not just about, knowing the right thing to do. It's about cultivating the strength to actually live it. It's like building a spiritual muscle, you could say.
Oh, I love that analogy. But even with all this talk about conquering karma and spiritual purification, the Murli also talks about, happiness and sorrow. It acknowledges that life isn't always sunshine and roses, right?
Oh, absolutely. The text actually presents it as a cycle, this back and forth between happiness and sorrow. And it's closely tied to whether we're following this divine guidance or getting swept up by worldly temptations, which, by the way, are personified as Rivan in the Murli.
Okay, interesting. So it's like this constant choice between those two paths, and depending on which one we choose, we experience either happiness or sorrow as a result.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this idea, it actually reflects some broader concepts that you find in a lot of different spiritual traditions, like duality, for instance, the idea that opposing forces are always at play, and also the cyclical nature of time. Good times and bad times, they inevitably follow each other.
So understanding this cycle, this back and forth, could actually be a key to sort of navigating life's ups and downs.
Right. It helps us to understand that both happiness and sorrow are temporary, and that recognizing those worldly temptations is really crucial if we want to choose the path of spiritual growth.
So how do we actually do that? How do we recognize those temptations and make better choices? The Murli talks about something called Yadki Yatra, the journey of remembrance. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Sure. So Yadki Yatra is about remembering the divine, remembering BAP as a way to purify the soul and find true bliss. And the text actually compares it to people traveling great distances, seeking wealth and happiness.
So it's like an inner pilgrimage, It's about seeking the true riches that are already within us.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Instead of looking for those external things to fulfill us, this journey is about tapping into that inner source of joy and contentment.
Now, this next part is where things get really thought-provoking for me. The Murli talks about people calling out for a divine being to come and purify the world, right? And it connects this to Takdir, which means destiny. But it doesn't sound like destiny is set in stone in this context.
That's right. The Murli actually implies that our destiny is woven together with our spiritual efforts. It suggests that some people have a more favorable destiny, or talk deer, because of their past actions. They kind of recognize the divine and embrace the teachings more easily.
So what about those who don't have that favorable destiny? Are they just stuck? The Murley uses the term Koti-Takdir for that, right? Does that mean there's no hope for those people?
Well, it's not about being doomed or predestined. The Murley emphasizes that spiritual effort can actually help overcome even difficult karmic circumstances. It's really a message of hope and empowerment.
Okay, so it's not just about passively accepting whatever happens. It's about taking an active role in shaping our spiritual destiny.
Exactly. We're not just helpless puppets of fate. We have a role to play. And that leads us to another important idea that comes up in the Murley, which is Remdil, a compassionate heart.
I notice that comes up a lot, yeah.
It does.
And especially when it comes to sharing spiritual knowledge with others.
Precisely. Compassion is presented as kind of a core quality for those who teach and guide others. It's even seen as reflecting the divine's own compassionate nature.
So it's not just about personal growth. It's about extending that same kindness and understanding to others as well.
It is. And it suggests that spiritual growth isn't a solo journey, that we can support each other along the way.
This has already given me so much to think about. I mean, we've covered, happiness as nourishment, conquering negative karma, remembering our true selves. It's amazing how these ideas, they're all intertwined.
You're picking up on the key threads beautifully,
Mhm.
and there's even more to uncover.
Yeah, and it also talks about this idea of the divine coming into the world in a simple form.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It specifically mentions that, Bap, the divine, comes in an ordinary form, not like a big, huge spectacle or anything like that.
It's not what you'd expect, right?
Right. And it emphasizes that this divine being connects with souls directly, speaking to them, through this unassuming form. It creates this very personal and intimate feeling, doesn't it?
It does, it does. And it's all about guiding souls toward purity, leading them away from this, old dilapidated world back home.
Yeah.
It's interesting how the text really describes the world, this Ravanaraja, as a place full of sorrow and suffering. Yeah, and it's a huge contrast to that Sukta it mentions, right? This land of happiness that's supposed to be the soul's true home.
Yeah.
It almost feels like we're living in exile, far from where we're meant to be.
That's a really powerful way to see it. And it kind of ties back to that choice we were talking about earlier, following that divine guidance, the Shremat, versus getting caught up in all those worldly temptations that rove Van.
Right. So by aligning ourselves with the Shrema, we can break free from this cycle of sorrow and find our way back to happiness back home.
That's the path that the Maruli lays out.
Yeah.
And this next part, this really caught my eye. It talks about creating a school in our own homes.
A school?
A school.
Yeah.
I was kind of confused by it at first, but it's not about traditional learning, is it?
No. It's talking about learning and teaching these spiritual principles, creating an environment where we can purify ourselves and then help other people do the same.
Right. It's like building this spiritual learning community where we can all grow together, which, makes me think about what you were asking earlier about whether everyone has the same capacity to conquer that negative karma. Maybe this plays a role, like having a supportive community could make a big difference.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's not just about the individual effort. It's about surrounding yourself with people who are on the same path and encouraging each other along the way.
Exactly. And this idea of community, it really reinforces what we were discussing earlier, right?
Yeah.
That purity, happiness, divine guidance, conquering negative karma, they're all part of this larger journey of spiritual awakening. And it's not just about transforming ourselves, but transforming the world around us as well.
Wow, that's a lot of responsibility. It can feel kind of overwhelming when you think about it. But the Murley does use some incredible imagery to make these concepts more tangible.
It does, like when it describes remembering the divine so intensely that you even forget your physical body as you're walking.
Oh, wow.
It reminds me of that phrase we talked about earlier. There is no nourishment like happiness. It's like that happiness is so potent that it can elevate us beyond our physical limitations.
Yeah, it's like it becomes a source of energy and strength, almost like propelling us forward on this journey.
Right.
And the Murley, compares this journey to people who travel these long distances seeking wealth and happiness.
Right.
And it encourages us to approach our spiritual journey with that same kind of dedication and commitment.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that the real treasures aren't material possessions, but that inner wealth of a purified soul and a connection to the divine.
And speaking of that connection, I keep thinking about that powerful line about people calling out for a divine being to come and purify the world.
Right.
And, it ties back to destiny again, suggesting those with a favorable destiny, that Takdir, are naturally drawn to this path.
Yeah, they recognize the divine and embrace those teachings more readily. It's almost as if their past actions have prepared them for this moment.
So then what about the people who don't have that, who have that Koti Takdir, that less favorable destiny? Are they just out of luck?
Well, not at all. Remember, the Murli Land really emphasizes that spiritual effort can overcome even challenging karmic circumstances.
Mm.
It's about recognizing our true identity as souls, beyond our physical limitations and beyond our past actions.
So regardless of our starting point, we all have the potential to connect with the divine and achieve that spiritual liberation.
Precisely. And the Murli is really speaking directly to that soul within each of us, encouraging us to break free from those limitations that we impose on ourselves. It's a message of hope and empowerment, regardless of our past.
It's so reassuring to hear that. But I do wonder, what happens if we choose to ignore that inner calling? What happens if we stray from this path?
Well, that's a really great question, and the Murli doesn't shy away from talking about the consequences of choosing worldly temptations over spiritual growth. It actually talks about how souls can become impure and lose their connection to the divine.
Oh, wow. So our choices really have that kind of impact, not just in our everyday lives, but on a deeper spiritual level as well.
Absolutely. It describes the pain and regret that comes with choosing the wrong path. It's almost as if we're damaging our spiritual register, accumulating negativity that hinders our progress.
That's a powerful way to think about it. It makes you really stop and think about the choices you make every day. But even when we stumble, there's always that reminder to cultivate Remdil, that compassionate heart.
Yes, and the Murli links this compassion directly to the divine, describing Bap as a compassionate teacher who guides souls with love and understanding.
It's like we're being called to emulate that divine quality, both in how we treat ourselves and in how we interact with other people. So compassion isn't just a nice thing to have, it's really fundamental to our spiritual nature.
Exactly. It's a reflection of the divine within us, and through compassion, we can connect with others on a much deeper level and support them on their spiritual journeys as well. It's really about recognizing that we're all in this together.
This is so insightful. It's like this Murli. It's not just a collection of spiritual teachings. It's really a roadmap for living a more meaningful and fulfilling life. It's about cultivating happiness as nourishment, conquering our inner negativity, and remembering who we truly are as souls.
Beautifully said. It's about aligning ourselves with the divine and embracing our role as compassionate guides for others. And it's a journey that definitely requires effort and dedication. But the rewards, as the Murli suggests, are immeasurable.
We're back, and I'm really curious to hear more about this ultimate destiny that the Murli talks about. It mentions something called a seed stage, right? Can you tell us more about that?
It does. This Bijarup state is so fascinating. It's described as a state of immense potential, like a tiny seed that holds the blueprint for a whole tree. The Murli suggests that when souls reach this level of spiritual development, they become like lighthouses, radiating the spiritual light outward.
So it's not just about reaching enlightenment for ourselves, it's about having this positive impact on the whole world around us.
Exactly. It's about becoming these instruments of transformation, helping to raise the consciousness of the whole planet. And the Murli is very specific about this. It encourages us to become like lighthouses, not just these little bulbs, emphasizing the far-reaching power of this spiritual energy.
I love that image. It really drives home the point that our individual journeys can have this huge ripple effect, inspiring others and creating a brighter world.
It does. And it connects back to what we were discussing earlier about compassion, right? Sharing that spiritual knowledge with kindness and understanding. As we purify ourselves and connect with the divine, we naturally become these beacons of light, encouraging other people to embark on their own journeys of transformation.
Yeah, it's like we become living examples of the teachings, not just talking about them, but really embodying them. And speaking of embodying qualities, there's a section about satyata and sadhyata, truthfulness and civility, that I found really interesting. Can you talk a little bit about the significance of these qualities in the Murli?
Sure. The Murli suggests that these qualities, they're really essential for spiritual progress. And it links satyata, or truthfulness, to directly experiencing the divine.
Okay, so by aligning our actions and our understanding with truth, we open ourselves up to a deeper connection with the divine. But what does that actually look like practically? How do we know that we're being truthful in that deeper sense?
That's a great question. And the Murli actually points to Swachta and Nirbhayata, purity and fearlessness, as the foundation of satyata.
So it's not just about speaking the truth, it's about cultivating a pure heart and a fearless spirit. It seems like the inner work is just as important as the outer actions.
Exactly. It's about living authentically and courageously, not being held back by fear or impurity.
And then it brings in sabiata, or civility. How does that fit into the picture? Is it just about being polite to other people?
Well, the Murli goes a little bit deeper than that. It actually presents civility as a reflection of our inner state. It's about treating others with respect and kindness, embodying those divine qualities of love and compassion in all of our interactions.
So it's like our outer behavior becomes a mirror reflecting our inner transformation. The more we cultivate those positive qualities within ourselves, the more naturally they'll just flow outward in how we treat other people.
Beautifully put. It's really about aligning our thoughts, our words, and our actions with the spiritual principles that we're learning. And speaking of navigating challenges, the Murli touches on destiny again, but this time it introduces a new element, adjusting to difficult circumstances. And it suggests that this adaptability can actually help us move through those tough times with grace and honor.
That makes me think about the cyclical nature of happiness and sorrow that we were talking about earlier. It seems like this ability to adapt, to adjust, could be really crucial for maintaining our spiritual equilibrium when those inevitable challenges come up.
You're so right. It really highlights the importance of flexibility and resilience on our spiritual journey. The Murli acknowledges that we will encounter obstacles and setbacks, but it encourages us to approach them with a positive attitude and a willingness to adapt.
So it's not about trying to avoid those difficulties altogether. It's about learning to navigate them in a way that preserves our dignity and helps us keep moving forward on our path.
Exactly. It's about developing that inner strength and wisdom to gracefully handle whatever life throws at us.
This has been such a rich and insightful deep dive. We've explored so much: the power of happiness as nourishment, the importance of conquering that negative karma, and the transformative potential of remembering our true divine nature.
It is amazing how interconnected these concepts are. We've also talked about the cycle of duality, the importance of purity, and the need to cultivate compassion, both for ourselves and for others.
And what really stands out to me is that idea that our spiritual journey isn't just about personal enlightenment. It's about becoming those beacons of light, radiating positivity, and contributing to a global shift in consciousness.
That's a beautiful takeaway.
Yeah.
It's a really powerful message of hope and responsibility, reminding us that we each have a role to play in creating a more peaceful, loving, and spiritually awakened world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with this. If, as the Morley suggests, each of us holds the potential to become a lighthouse of spiritual light, what steps can you take today to shine more brightly in your own life and inspire others to do the same? It's a question worth pondering as you continue on your own unique journey of spiritual exploration.